and so on. And everyone is welcome to participate. So I think if I'm correct, Lesley, 100 people registered for this event. We already have 43 in the meeting, and I think there are people from all over the world joining us. So again, welcome. We'd love to hear from everyone during today's session. So if you have a question for the speakers, please do use the raise your hand option in Teams, the little yellow hand. Or otherwise, use the chat just to enter your question into the chat, and we'll make sure, that you get our attention and we'll give you an opportunity to come in and comment. You also should all have received a flyer which gives further information about the book and also links to the author biographies. And attendees at this event will be given a promotional code for 20% of the price of the book. So that's great news. And I think Dinez will put this in the chat. And I think the promotional code for the 20% discount is also on the last slide, I think, of the last presentation slide. So you'll get to see that soon. So before I start, I just thought, I'll tell you a little bit about the University of Greenwich. So for those of you all around the world, this is an aerial photograph of the University of Greenwich. So the Institute for Lifecourse Development is hosted by the University of Greenwich in London, United Kingdom. And as you can see in the photograph, this is a photograph of the beautiful main campus that's on the banks of the River Thames. And it's actually part of the old Royal Naval College, and next to the Royal Park, near the historic Prime Meridian line. So you may recognize this beautiful campus from some of the famous movies like Pirates of the Caribbean. We all wish that we could be on campus right now, but you probably all heard that we're still working from home, and we'll be doing so for the next few weeks of lockdown. But one of the great advantages of doing this event online is that we can have people from all over the world joining us. So one of the great things of the online book launch. Next slide, please, Dinez. So the ILD, in partnership with Sage Publications, is just absolutely delighted to welcome you to this event to mark the launch of the first edition of Doing Hermeneutic Phenomenological Research, a Practical Guide by Dr. Lesley Dibley, Professor Suzanne Dickerson, Associate Professor Mel Duffy, and Professor Roxanne Vandermause. And I'll introduce the authors in a few minutes. The book was published on the 31st of October, so just a few days ago. And this practical guide offers an approachable introduction to doing this type of research across the health and social sciences. Next slide, please, Dinez. So I just thought I'd tell you a little bit about the ILD. So the ILD is a key anchor resource where researchers, partners, and stakeholders can come together to develop effective solutions to some of society's grand challenges. So typically, these grand challenges require expertise coming from lots of different disciplines. And hence, we have established these 6 interdisciplinary research centers aiming to provide real solutions in the real world. So our 6 centers are the Centers for Inequalities, the Center for Workforce Development, the Center for Chronic Illness and Aging, and of course, Lesley Dibley is the center lead of that particular center, the Center for Thinking and Learning, the Center for Mental Health, and the Center for Vulnerable Children. And I just wanted to stress that this practical guide is, of course, not limited to nursing and can be used in qualitative research in education, human sciences, social sciences, and in fact, any topic or field across the 6 ILD centers will benefit from using this method. Next slide, please, Dinez. So one of the reasons for the success of this book is the great international team, which has worked really, really well together across several different time zones. And it's now my honor to introduce you to the authors. So I'll start with Lesley. Lesley is Reader in Nursing Research and Education here at the University of Greenwich. She also leads the Center for Chronic Illness and Aging in the Institute for Lifecourse Development. Lesley was awarded her PhD in 2014, and the topic was on the experience of stigma in people with IBD. Lesley has recently completed another funded project on the experience of kinship stigma in IBD and has other active projects, including an exploration of the experiences of young adults living with scoliosis, the experience of adjustment to intestinal stoma in people with IBD, and the complex care needs of older people with IBD. Lesley teaches qualitative methods and she supervises master's and PhD students. She publishes regularly in high impact journals and presents at national and international conferences. So welcome, Lesley, and we look forward to your presentation in a few minutes. I would like to introduce you to Suzanne, or Professor Suzanne Dickerson. So Suzanne is from the School of Nursing in the University of Buffalo. Suzanne is a professor and department chair of biobehavioral health and clinical science at the University of Buffalo School of Nursing. Her current research focuses on sleep science with the goal of understanding patients' contextual meaning of sleep-wake disturbances through hermeneutical phenomenology. Apologies for that. It's a real tongue twister, that, isn't it? The insight forms the basis of new knowledge that can be instrumental in translating clinical research to practice that embeds meaningful approaches into care practices to improve sleep. She has developed an online course in the methodology, and she mentors PhD and visiting faculty in this approach. She's also a senior member of the Hermeneutic Phenomenology Institute group and mentors other members as well. So next, I would like to introduce you to Mel Duffy. Mel Duffy is from the Dublin City University in Ireland. Mel is assistant professor in sociology and sexuality studies in the School of Nursing, Psychotherapy and Community Health in Dublin City University. She teaches courses in sociology and sexuality at both undergraduate and graduate level. After completing her PhD in DCU in 2008, she has pursued an active research program in qualitative research with a particular focus on phenomenology. I said it correct this time. Clap. Thank you, Lesley. You know, I really practiced saying it before and I got all twisted, my tongue got all twisted, sorry. Her work focuses on lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and intersex individuals' experiences of living their lives in the world they find themselves in, writing and presenting on lesbian health and healthcare, coming out, relationship and sexuality education, disability, identity, residential care, and experiences of health outcomes. Mel holds a BA and an MA by research from the National University of Ireland, and she also holds a PhD from Dublin City University. So we look forward to your presentation soon, Mel. I also would like to introduce you to Roxanne Vandermause, or Annie. Annie is the interim dean, professor, and the Donald L. Ross Endowed Chair for Advancing Nursing Practice at the University of Missouri St. Louis College of Nursing. Her research involves the use of HP and mixed methods to study addictions and racial, ethnic, and gender disparities in care for mental health and other chronic conditions. She has presented across the US and internationally and published widely in various venues. She teaches at all educational levels in nursing and across various graduate level disciplines. And the coursework includes ethics, theory, and qualitative methodologies. Many of Annie's PhD students use these methods to study human phenomena in the context of health and well-being, and she's highly sought after for her expertise in these methods. And last but not least, I would like to introduce you to Jay Seaman from Sage Publishing. So Jay Seaman is publisher for research methods and study skills at Sage Publishing. She manages a group of editors in the books team, and she liaises with colleagues in the digital and online methods team. She has been at Sage since 2007 and has published across a wide range of disciplines and worked on quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods titles. Jay has presented at international conferences, run training sessions, and facilitated workshops on a range of research methods and publishing industry topics. I just wanted to thank you all for attending today, and I really hope you will enjoy this event. So I'll now hand you over to Lesley. Thanks, Lesley.
Thank you. Thanks, Rosanna, for that lovely introduction. It's a real delight to have you all here. I've seen lots of familiar names in the list of participants, and some I don't know and lots of people I do, and it's great that you're all here. And we get to share with you our huge excitement at the realisation of our endeavours. We hope we've got an international audience this evening, so do feel free to just add a comment in the chat function to tell us where you are calling in from. Now, what's going to happen is each of us is going to speak in turn about a different aspect of the book before we invite our commissioning editor and publisher, Jay from Sage, to join us in the Q&A panel. So be ready with your questions there. But we're going to begin with the ever lovely Professor Suzanne Dickerson, who's going to tell you how it all began. If you could have the next slide, please, Danaz. Thank you. Suzanne. Suzanne?
Sorry, it would help if I unmuted. Can you hear me now? Okay, yes, thank you so much. It's a delight to be here and participate in this event. We're very excited about it. And so my task is to tell you how it all started. Well, we all were participating in an institute out of Wisconsin-Madison that started in the 90s. And Nancy Dickelman was the lead person. And she and Pat Benner and many others that I won't list right now had been developing this approach to research. It used to be called Heideggerian hermeneutics. It was called philosophical hermeneutics. It was called like an interpretive phenomenology, but we settled on the term hermeneutic phenomenological research. So anyway, so we've been meeting there. They started with having methods sessions where we would bring our data and the members would help us analyze. And this membership was really truly amazing because it's a very international group of scholars that got together to really work with a methodology. So we came together, and subsequently there was an advanced workshop every year that I attended many of them from '98 till present. And they've been at various universities across the US, mostly in Madison, Wisconsin. I'll name a few. I can't remember all of them, but Indiana University, Denver, and the last couple of years it's been at the University of Buffalo, except we had to delay our last summer event. But we do meet every year. We meet with students. They come and they ask questions about the methods, and we help them with the methods. And we really came to be, in the last 5 years or so, we really need to sit down and gather all this together and into a manuscript and into a helpful book. So that's how it really started, and really the students and the people that were interested in the methods really would always want the feedback and help with it. And really we wanted it to be something that was more lasting and had a good reference for when we weren't actually in place meeting face to face at the time. So that's how it all started. And when I had mentioned at one of the meetings that I really would like to have a book, the others have stepped forward and we developed this team to start writing this paper, so or the book, I should say. So with that, I'll keep it shorter because I know we're kind of behind on the time frame, but I'd be glad to have any questions about the origins of it and how we've worked really hard to help people with this particular methods. I've had many doctoral students have wonderful projects that are really making a difference in the world, and now I'm seeing other research teams are wanting to have this perspective on their studies and their clinical trials, and I'm working on a clinical trial right now to discover how to integrate mental health care in the methadone clinics. So it's really exciting, and we see it growing, and I'm just very happy. I got my copy yesterday in the mail, and so I'm very happy. So with that, I guess the next person to go on is Lesley. Or is it Mel? No, Mel is next.
Yes.
Purpose behind the book. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I too am delighted to be here. I actually delighted to actually see it in print. And I did ask Lesley last Friday when we met, what did it smell like? I have to tell her, unlike her, it smells wonderful. And because I like books and I love the smell of books. And it's really interesting because what was the purpose? Why did we do it? For me, it was, I met both Suzanne and Annie back in 2006. And it was there for the first time I met a group of women, and they were mainly women. And the philosophers at the time happened to be men, which is always very interesting. We did drag in one or two females, thank God. And what I was looking for was a home for how I think. And what it became was a home for thinking. And that is what the school is about. It's about a home for thinking. And we wanted to take that home for thinking and bring it to others, and to, you know, when we all have PhD students, it is how to take them from the moment of the thought that they had about what they wanted to study to the conclusion of going and graduating and having done this wonderful piece of work. But how do you do it? And so many different ways of doing phenomenology. And how do we do it? How do we come about taking a germ of an idea, transforming it into what we call a research question, and then into a doing and hearing and listening? And what we really do is take different experiences, different phenomena that the ordinary everyday life, and we go almost like a torch into the darkness, into the shadows, and we ask people, what is it like for you? How do you experience this world? And we sit and we listen. And of course, the wonderful thing is, when you write an ethics form and you seek ethical approval from your university to do this, they want to know what other questions you're going to ask. And it's very difficult for a PhD student, as I found myself, because you can't really write back to them and say, well, it all depends on what they tell you. And it does depend on what they tell you, but ethics people don't like that. They're a little bit more concrete than we are. We kind of, you know, I want to describe it of, we like sitting on a cloud and looking around and seeing what's beneath, what's going on underneath. You know, I remember a friend and colleague once said to me, it's like looking underneath the hood of a car. How does the engine work? How does this work? And for people in society, the society is their engine. They are the people who go out and make it work. And we want to explore how that is done. And that is, the book is to help people to do that exploration. But it's not for the faint-hearted, because it's been able to sit and listen and hear without judgment, without preconceived notions, without having your conclusion chapter written. And it's allowing that conclusion to emerge. And I think in a way, it's very much allowing the thinking to come into being And really, we bring forth that which needs to be thought about. And it's the little nuggets that you never thought of having to think about. And we want others to think. And I suppose in a way to sit with something. And for me, at the moment, it's like, you know, I'm involved in a really interesting project on intersex and looking at those experiences in Irish society. And it's listening to the stories. And those stories are what people want to tell us. And the most interesting thing is that normally when you go and you gather data, you think, well, you go and you gather the data. We're not kind of, you know, a get the data and run. People come back to us. And we have found in the present study, people have come back 2, 3, and 4 times, because what they're doing is bringing more of what they want us to know, of how they want us to put on the table that we need to think about. But it's not just us. We have this whole theoretical background, this Heideggerian, this Gadamerean, this Sartrean, this Merleau-Ponty. It's all these wonderful people who went before us, who looked on society and really could be thought of as navel-gazing, and we move into that space. We bring in feminism, we bring in queer theory, we bring in social structuralism, we bring in, you know, all these different ways. We bring in ways of thinking about nursing, ways of thinking about in psychology, how we look at the self, ways of thinking in sociology, how we are within society, music, whatever is your way, whatever is your way of thinking, this book will guide you towards bringing a new way of looking at your discipline, your phenomena, in ways that you never thought of doing before. And I hand over to Annie.
Oh, Mel, it's always so wonderful to hear you. And it just reminds me of all the amazing conversations that we've had over this past year, a little more. And I get to speak very briefly about how we wrote the book. And I think it's an incredible story, and because it is, in my mind, a model for how we should be doing scholarship in our respective universities, how we should be conducting ourselves as we try to disseminate information and share information and come together to think. I call these co-authors my sisters. We actually started with a conversation, as any good hermeneutic phenomenologist or those with a propensity to hermeneutics does. We start with a conversation. It's all about speaking to one another and being part of an endeavor to learn something new. So we started talking about the need for the book, as Suzanne said. We'd been gathering together. We'd been working in our respective ways. And so we suddenly thought, we're going to do it. We're going to get together and make this book. How do we start? Let's start with a conversation. So we put a schedule together. Every 2 weeks we met. And for me, it was the wee hours of the morning, 7 a.m. That's early for me. You know, Suzanne was an hour later, and our sisters across the pond were later in the day, and we just kept that schedule. Not every 2 weeks, but many times we were meeting just to start a conversation, to talk about what do we want to do with this book, set up we want it to be this way or that way. We don't want it to be concretized. We want it to be open. We want it to be an experiential understanding. And so how do we do that? Well, the first thing we have to do is decide authorship, which is, you know, always a contention in many publications and groups coming together. But it was easy for us because we're used to being, you know, non-hierarchical. You know, we are a community. We share information. So we decided to do it alphabetically. And so then we had Dibley, Dickerson, Duffy, and Vandermause. And voila, as it turned out, Dibley, the first author, happened to be the most organized person of the group, probably. And absolutely, the first author should go to her because she has kept us in line the whole time. Are we meeting in 2 weeks? And this is what we're going to talk about. And so she was very structured in the process that helped us to get together in terms of what we needed to do. But our conversations were all very open. So we would get together for our own inspiration and have conversations about the thinking that we wanted to put out and how we wanted to address the information and share it. And what we decided to do ultimately was divide up come up with an outline, divide up the chapters. You take 2, you take 2, you take 2, you take 2, and write those chapters and then share them around in a round robin so that we could edit one another's chapters and go around in such a manner iteratively, which is an aspect of the analytical process we use in hermeneutics. And it's a research process that we were all very familiar with. So we were able to go around and to go around and to go around until the point came where we said, I don't know who wrote that chapter. Did you write that chapter? I don't know who wrote that. So we do have our areas that we, tended to put more of our scholarly attention, citations and such into, but we became one author. And that's the beauty of the methodology. And I believe that it's an outcome of how we have been, habituating ourselves over the decades to inquire of new information, to be interested in the new idea, to be expecting to be surprised, to be open to all things, and to eliminate, I guess I would say, our egos. We're very conscious of where we come from and what our areas of belief and interest are, but we are always looking at what is the purpose of what we're doing here as a whole. So in some ways, this became almost like a research endeavor, with the research question being, how do we prepare a resource for aspiring hermeneutic phenomenological researchers and scholars? And we always went back to that. How is it that we're going to be disseminating this product for our others who can use the thinking that we've acquired over the course of time? So that's been incredibly rewarding. We became a group of friends and scholars. We practiced open, curious inquiry. We trust one another. We trust one another's interest in the purpose of the book, and we're writing as one. And it's kind of sad to have it over, although it's very nice to have a product. I will say that we got to do the cleaning up part of things, where we needed to go back in and check citations, work with SAGE to answer questions, and working with this group has been pure joy, because we all have various areas that we've expanded into our own scholarship and have resources available, but many of us have read some of the same contents, certainly in terms of the philosophical foundations of our work, Heidegger, Gadamer, and other philosophers, and we have come together every year to talk about those readings and writings, and to write ourselves and to share with one another. So we speak a common language, and that made it just a joy to do. And it wasn't so bad doing the citations, because we could say, wait, do you have the concept of time? Do you have that Benner's book? We were able to pull our citations together, many of them common, some of them our own, and work very well under the watchful eye of Dr. Lesley Dibley, I might add. I think that this is a model for scholarship. I think that this is a way that we can share what we know, and the way that we think, or the kinds of questions that we come into in our respective worlds, our areas of research focus and interest, foci, and we can we can offer what we know to others and work together in scholarship and shared writing, really using the principles of hermeneutics, which is that open inquiry, that ability to look again and again, to be repetitive and iterative in our analysis, to see things from a broader angle, and to be willing to go in different directions and to see things in various ways to perfect our work or to get better as we go on. So I think that I think that the way that we were able to put this book together is a way that I will continue to work, and I'm sure my colleagues will continue to work. And I hope that anyone who reads the book will learn ways of shared scholarship that are incredibly fulfilling. And with that, I'm going to pass this off to Dr. Dibley. Thanks everyone for being here, and I hope you enjoy what we've done.
Thanks, Annie. That's really lovely. That sort of kind of sums up beautifully how I've felt about the experience and the process we had of writing this. And of course, I had the whip, so that was okay to keep you all in shape. Now, we wrote this book to make hermeneutic phenomenological research accessible in many ways to students and supervisors, researchers, whether novice or experienced, and it's got a really distinct structure and several options for how it can be used. So just going to have a little bit of a look at that now. So in terms of structure, the book's divided into 4 parts. Each has an introduction and a summary, and signposts the reader on to further reading materials. And we also inserted some explanatory boxes on the way through as well, where there were issues that demanded a little bit more attention, but were sort of a side shoot from the main focus of things. So things that needed acknowledging, but the reader could then follow up for themselves. So one example of that is in chapter 2, where we have an explanatory box about Heidegger and National Socialism, which is an aspect that's not to be ignored, but we didn't want to get sidetracked by it. So as I said, the book's divided into 4 parts. The first part is philosophy and thinking. Now, we were not trying to write a philosophy textbook. We were trying to give the basic grounding and understanding that our work was coming out of, to give this overview of phenomenology and the core philosophers before we move on to explore Heidegger and Gadamer particularly and their core concepts in more detail, whilst situating hermeneutic phenomenology in that broad paradigm of interpretive phenomenological research. In part 2, we're thinking mainly about how you design the hermeneutic phenomenological study, and here you'll find chapters on literature reviewing, developing and refining the research question, population and sampling decisions, and being ethical. And we explain throughout and remind the reader often of the relationship between the philosophy, the methodology, and the methods, so that at every stage the reader can understand why, philosophically and methodologically, they need to design hermeneutic phenomenology studies in a particular way. And we address directly the core challenges facing the research, the endless agony of defending your sample size, for example, and providing commentary to help you defend the design decisions that you make on the way through. Part 3 is more about conducting the study, and here is where we get to what we call the engine room of hermeneutic phenomenological research: the data collection, the data analysis and interpretation, and the writing of it. And we guide you again through the philosophical and methodological reasons for collecting, analysing and interpreting data in the way that we do, help you to identify the choices and address the inherent challenges that lie within the approach. We spend some time here. It's not easy, and that's evidenced by the lack of clear guidance elsewhere on how to do it, to explain the how of doing hermeneutic analysis. And it's probably, I think, the chapter that we spent the longest amount of time on, to make it as accessible and as explicit as possible. But we give you examples and options and illustrations and explanations to help you through. And in this part as well, we also consider reflexivity. It's so very important as a means of enhancing and demonstrating credibility and trustworthiness in hermeneutic research, and especially because of the situatedness of the researcher in hermeneutic studies. So like ethical considerations, reflexivity doesn't just happen at one point, it's relevant all the way through the study. So we help you to consider the concept and its appropriateness for addressing the influence that you can have on your study and helping you contain the negative influences and enhance the positive. And then part 4 was in danger of becoming a little bit self-indulgent. This is our personal entrees. This is where we have provided a montage really of the work the 4 of us have done using hermeneutic phenomenology. I remember when we wrote the first draft of this, I really realized my position as the baby of the group in terms of my knowledge and experience of using this approach against the wealth of experience and duration of fantastic research that my colleagues had put out. They never made me feel like the baby of the group, but I've got something to aspire to, so that's great. But what's really noticeable, and what the reason that we included this section, is that we each took a very different route into becoming hermeneutic phenomenologists, and we might call our travels a series of happy coincidence. I think Heidegger would likely call it thrownness, that we've ended up where we are because of where we've come from, and that's really evident in the stories that we tell, but our purpose of putting those stories in there and sharing them with you is to show all you lovely readers that there's no right way of entering the world of hermeneutic phenomenological research, that many routes are possible, and the one thing that is absolutely certain is that they are all long and thoughtful and never completed. Right? So when it comes to using the book, because the thinking and the linking back to the philosophy is laced throughout the book, there are at least 4 ways that you could make use of it. You could start at the very beginning, which we all know is a very good place to start, and you can read it through sequentially to the end and build your own hermeneutic circle of understanding of it and its content as you go. Or you could dip in and out to access the how-to chapters in parts 2 and 3, according to what you need at that moment in time. And this works really well because we revisit concepts that we've introduced in detail earlier on in the book, and we remind you of them again in relation to other aspects or in relation to the particular focus of each chapter as we go through. Or if you've already got quite a good understanding of hermeneutic phenomenology, you could just look up the specific topics and drill down right to the mention of that topic in the book, perhaps comparing with other textbooks to build your own understanding or critique the content. Or looking for wider resources, you could just access the core readings, the further resource lists that we provide, use the entire book as one huge signpost into the world of hermeneutic phenomenological research. Whichever approach you take, and hopefully you'll use it in all of those ways, we're confident that we've produced a textbook to help you grow your knowledge, your insight, and your understanding of hermeneutic phenomenological research. So that is the essence of our presentation for you. I'm going to hand over now to Rosanna, who's going to chair the Q&A panel. Just before I do that, I just want to say, when I asked you all to put notes in about where you are coming in from for this meeting, we have Ireland, Munich in Germany, Thunder Bay, Ontario, South Dakota, obviously DCU, New Mexico, Buffalo, Coventry in the UK, Saudi Arabia, everywhere, Wales, Limerick in Ireland. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for your attention. And so, Rosanna, over to you.
Thanks, Lesley. First of all, I wanted just to say